Kandamal in in Orissa. You had Kandamals in Orissa in 2008. An extremely systematic build-up. In the CD that has been given to you, I think Smriti said that all the material that I have passed on has been given to you. I would urge you to look at these two PowerPoints which I have put together. One is called Communalism and the Secular State, Religious Liberty in Gujarat, Kandamal and Karnataka. And the other one is Communal Violence and Justice. It gives you certain references. I don't think hard copies have been given. You've been given CDs of this entire thing. Or you will be giving them, yeah. Now I urge it because I'm going to be referring to it and you might find it very, very useful. There are certain examples of cases, examples of certain sloganeering that attract 153A, 153B, and it's extremely important that we recognize that. The Orissa I will come to before I come to Gujarat. Orissa is very, very important because Orissa and Karnataka were two states where the mobilization against the Indian Christian community was happening very systematically along with the mobilization against Gujarat Christians in 1998. Now, next week there's going to be the release of a book in Delhi on how the cases related to Orissa have completely failed. The fast-track courts appointed have completely failed. But some of the details you will find here. But for example, I just wanted to mention to you that there were over 2,000 cases of violence against the Christian community spread over 300 villages. About 99 to 100 lives were lost. And yet you found FIRs being registered only in about 83 cases. Out of these 83 cases, you've not had many convictions. You have had convictions of 16 people, and certainly not the masterminds or the political perpetrators. Now that's the other problem that we have found related to communal violence. You have the conspirators and the perpetrators who actually indulge in the hate speech, in the mobilization, and not actually indulge in the violence. If at all the law works, it will capture the foot soldiers, but it will not capture the masterminds that are responsible for the violence. Apart from 2008 and 2006, there are two huge carnages against the minorities that we need to factor into our discourse. 1984. What happened in this city in 1984, where over 3,000 Sikhs were massacred. In the wake of the assassination of a prime minister, the entire city was paralyzed. The Sikh community was targeted and victimized, and in a very systematic manner, Congress party leaders were influencing the police to allow violence against the Sikh community. Then you had an entire period, 1986 I mentioned to you, when you had the first demand for this majoritarian ideology of building a temple growing. The BJP accepts that demand, and from 86 to 1992, you had almost 97 bouts of communal violence taking place wherever Advani's Rath Yatra went. So wherever he was mobilizing for this ostensible program to build a temple, there was violence either before he reached or after he left. Now the question we need to ask is, how many of those bouts of violence have been prosecuted? The Verma Committee Report, which came out after 17 years, tells a sorry story. That even the case for the demolition of the Babri Masjid is still pending in the Raebareli court. Advani is an accused, Murli Manoj Joshi is an accused, Uma Bharti is an accused, is still in a mess and legal shambles, and the prosecution is not underway. You had a police officer, a woman police officer, deposing in open court. She was in the security of Advani, and she even deposed about the words uttered by him when he was standing there, and even then the prosecution has not taken off. So what is it? What is it within the Indian legal framework that is preventing the furthering and the prosecution of these offences against religious minorities? That is a question we need to deliberate upon, reflect upon, and arrive at some sort of understanding about. After After 1992 and the shameful act of the demolition at Ayodhya, again you had bouts of violence in Bhopal, Ahmedabad, Jaipur, and the worst possible was the city where I come from, which is Bombay. Bombay burned for almost a whole week in December and for 3 to 4 weeks in January in targeted and systematic violence that was perpetrated openly by the Shiv Sena leading the mobs. The Sri Krishna Commission report, the Justice Sri Krishna Commission report that came out in February 1998, 5 years after the violence had ended, was a scathing indictment. Was a scathing indictment of the Bharatiya Janata Party and its politics and the Shiv Sena and its politics. But unfortunately, the perpetrators belong to these Hindu right-wing organizations. But the government in power in Maharashtra was a Congress government which called itself secular. Now this is what I mean, that while the perpetrators belong to a certain ideology, the government that had the power to ensure the prosecution failed to do so. And my friend and colleague Meena Menon and I, through the Right to Information Act, accessed a lot of documents about 92-93, which we put together in this third PowerPoint, Discriminatory Justice, which is also being given to you, which will tell you that though the Congress NCP government won 2 elections, promising the implementation of the Sri Krishna Commission report, 31 police officers named by Justice Sri Krishna in his report as deserving of criminal prosecution because of their complicit activities in fomenting violence, all 31 officers, except one who was dismissed by Police Commissioner Satish Sahni, all 30 officers were promoted. So even a government and a party calling itself secular failed its mandate when it did not pursue the prosecution of those guilty for the 92-93 violence. And that brings me to another fundamental point, which is that it is this cross-political consensus on the impunity given to mass crimes within the Indian framework that has allowed this widespread impunity that for the first time we have managed to puncture related to Gujarat 2002, and I'd like to come to how we have managed to do that. But politically, there's a kind of the 2 major parties, Congress guilty of 1984, doing everything it can to let those people go scot-free, and unfortunately the Hindu right-wing forces responsible for all the other bouts of violence, not interested in prosecution, any of that violence. And for the first time, and this one says with a matter of some pride, the struggle for justice in Gujarat, we have managed to puncture this culture of impunity. And how did this happen? Did it happen by chance, by coincidence? What were the factors responsible that allowed this to happen is what we need to understand as strategy to be able to implement it in future. Before I come to Gujarat of 2002, I'd also like to mention one more aspect to this theoretical understanding of the failure of the rule of law to ensure minority rights. Is that we must not forget, because India has a robust legal system in operation, but we also have a failing criminal justice system. So we must also contextualize what we are saying about minority rights in the context of what's happening to general convictions and general acquittals overall. That while the rights of minorities is no doubt abysmal, insecure, they are targeted, many other sections of Indians are also targeted. The poor, Adivasis, tribals, and the non-prosecution of normal criminal cases. Our conviction rates are pathetic. Trials take over 15 to 17 to 20 years to reach completion. We don't have a witness protection program. And legal aid, we don't have quality legal aid being given to people who can't afford the law. So, the sad quality of minority rights within this whole scenario needs to also be put in a relative framework. We can't say it's only the minorities who are being discriminated. Though of course we are emphasizing that religious minority being discriminated against is a gross failure of the Indian state at fundamental levels. But having said that, the criminal justice system is also failing a whole lot of other Indians who are not religious minorities, and we need to just keep that in mind. Now coming to Gujarat. The overall human rights situation in India, its failure to sign or to ratify or to legislate on the international treaties that it signed. We still have not got a torture law in place. We still don't have a law that looks at targeted violence or genocide in place. We still don't have a robust system that ensures independence of the prosecution in place. All international standards that have been brought in over the last 15, 20, 25 years. So one of the mechanisms that India brought in as a recognition of its obligation to international forums and communities and the international discourse and international justice was the Protection of Human Rights Act, PHRA, in 1991. Now, following that, what was supposed to follow was the establishment of a National Human Rights Commission and State Human Rights Commissions. Now, unfortunately, I can't talk about that, but we've really, our State Human Rights Commissions are in bad shape. Our National Human Rights Commission is headed, under law, is supposed to be headed by a former Chief Justice of the country. And again, whereas there are several issues about the NHRC, which need to be gone into in a forum like this. I hope somebody is doing it. I certainly don't want to take up my time doing it. But I would like to say that NHRC has not had the most glorious of track records. However, in certain periods, NHRC, because of the certain individuals there, has had moments of extreme importance, and those have certainly played a role, particularly in the Gujarat 2002 genocidal carnage cases. On the 1st of March 2002, under former Chief Justice Verma, NHRC took suo motu notice of what was happening in Gujarat and said that it was going to visit and it was going to make an independent assessment of the complete collapse of the rule of law, etc., etc.